Now, introducing the Queen of Men's Health.
Welcome to the Gilbert podcast, where you'll find the premier men's health info delivered to you the only way I know how, truthful and raw, with the occasional boner joke thrown in. If you guys like this episode, subscribe to my YouTube and slide in the DMs on Instagram and join the party. Rick Collins, nice to have you.
Good to see you. Thanks for having me.
When I describe you to people,
Uh-oh.
not what Eric describes you as.
Okay.
What I describe you is the steroid lawyer to all of Earth.
Oh, wow. Okay. A global kind of thing. I like it.
You're internationally known.
Well, thank you.
Would that be an appropriate way to?
Yeah, it's
start?
I guess so. That's a good start. I mean, I have given lectures in Bangkok, Thailand, and Guangzhou, China, and all sorts of other sort of exotic, cool places. So, I mean, I think that a lot of what I do involves anabolic steroids. As you know, I probably handled more steroid, SARMs, peptides, research chemicals, tainted dietary supplements, doping in sports, use of banned substances in other drug failure contexts, like cops or firefighters who are tested and are shown to have used something that they weren't supposed to have used. So I do a lot of that everywhere, but yeah, I love what I do. I was probably a meathead before I was a lawyer, competed as a bodybuilder before I even went to law school.
Because you're jacked. You're still jacked.
Thank you. And I still train super hard. So yeah, for me, I was able to integrate what I was interested in, what I was passionate about, and outside of my career as in the law, with my legal training and experience. I'm the happiest kid on the block.
I love it because you have your CSCS as well, right?
I do. So yes, I'm a certified strength and conditioning specialist at NSCA. So I've straddled both worlds. So the world of the law as an attorney, which is primarily what I do. But I co-wrote a men's fitness book called Alpha Male Challenge, which is kind of like within our topic areas for today. So yes, I've walked the walk of training for years. I'm very much into fitness and nutrition. I was a personal trainer. I ran a personal training business for a while. So yes, so the CSCS is very cool.
That's so awesome. So I wanted to talk about testosterone replacement initially, because there's a lot of guys watching this who are either on TRT or considering it.
Right.
And there seems to be so much controversy surrounding it. Whereas with women, when they go into menopause, it's almost like that's the thing. They go on hormones. It's socially accepted. Nobody bats an eye. If a guy considers testosterone replacement, there seems to be so many social stigmas attached to it. And right now, even some legal things that are in question. So when it comes to a man wanting to maybe feel better and just replace what he's not producing, why do you think all of a sudden this seems like this biggest issue socially?
So I think there's the all of a sudden is part of it. So I think we're kind of moving in a direction societally where it's not as okay to be traditionally masculine, and testosterone is viewed as sort of like the demon syrup that makes men do the bad things that they do. But it's not really new. Alan Alda, the actor from MASH in 1975, did an interview in Ms. Magazine where he blamed testosterone for all the bad things that happen. And I think he was the one who first came up with the term testosterone poisoning. So that this concept that this hormone that is endogenous, it's in your body, my body, every little baby's body, that would somehow be the culprit in all of these bad things, which kind of became a narrative. And I think that there are those people who believe that testosterone is bad, that testosterone is why wars occur, testosterone is why there's all the strife in the world, and they blame it, and I think that's because it's tied to the idea of aggression in a lot of people's minds. That I think if you ask the average person, does testosterone cause aggressive behavior? What would they say?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Roid rage.
Right. Sure. Yeah. I mean,
Why not?
at its highest point, right? But even endogenous, even your own testosterone as a man makes you act in certain ways that are aggressive and whatnot. And we've talked about this, and there's a lot of research into that idea of how is testosterone and aggression related. Certainly, testosterone is about challenges and about improving status. That's a large part of what testosterone does. So establishing dominance or higher levels of ranking in a social hierarchy. And when you look, I guess, in the animal world, well, how do animals improve their status in a ranking? How do I, if I'm a chimpanzee, how do I go from being like down at the bottom of the pack to being closer to the top? Because, and everybody wants to be closer to the top, right? You're going to get better food, more water, more mating partners, all the resources that you want. And so the way that you would, get a better status is, not a lot of choices for a chimpanzee. It's going to be teeth and claws, right? You're going to fight. You're going to be, so that's that sort of aggression. But we're not, hopefully most of us aren't chimpanzees at this point. We're a little,
we're gorillas.
We're gorillas. And I love silverback, and one of my training partners have called me silverback, and we call each other that. But, and that's been going on for a while.
Yeah.
So it's funny that this is the summit. But for us as humans, we're a little bit more nuanced and sophisticated in what we can do. So there are ways of establishing a higher status that don't involve any aggression or certainly violence. It could be through, going to school and getting a better job or improving. There's a million ways that you can increase your status. They've even shown that, that when men bid against each other in a charity auction, it increases their testosterone. The competition between 500, do I hear 550, 600, that is provokes, and the outcome of all of it is that money goes to charity. This is a good thing. This is a good social pro-social behavior. So testosterone can have pro-social behaviors just as much as anti-social behaviors. And in humans, we really shouldn't use animal data to talk about it. So I think that's one of the reasons why testosterone gets a bad rap. We're also kind of, as a society, I think we're moving toward a more acceptance of a more non-binary kind of standard as a good thing to be looked at positively. So somebody who is more traditionally masculine, for those who are old enough to remember John Wayne maybe, or something like that, that's now looked at as something bad. And even experts or so-called experts will say it, because in 2019, the American Psychological Association, you'd think they would know about psychology, right? A little, well, maybe not actually, because they came out with a position paper that said that traditional masculinity is toxic, that it's harmful to boys and men. And when you really think about it, certainly anything can be, there are aspects of what men do that's bad, but there's aspects of what women do that might be stereotypical behaviors that are bad, and we can't throw out the baby with the bathwater. So those are the reasons, I think, more recently, but also going back, I think testosterone being an anabolic steroid is part of the problem, right?
Yeah.
So back in the 80s, there was increasing views and perspectives on doping in sports. The idea that there's some athletes that are out there, maybe they're in the Olympics or in football, and they're using anabolic steroids, and testosterone being sort of the godfather of anabolic steroids, the parent compound, that's bad for sport. That what's going to happen to sports if we let this happen, right? And so hearings were held in Congress, and then in 1988, a Canadian by the name of Ben Johnson, who was an Olympic sprinter, wins the gold medal in Seoul, Korea. Yay for the Canadian! Beat the American, Carl Lewis.
Yeah.
And guess what happens? He tests positive for Winstrol. And so suddenly the sports media goes crazy, and Congress is worried. Well, what will happen if people think that this is just a chemical contest? What's going to happen to sports? So they held more hearings, and in 1990 they passed a law that took testosterone and all other anabolic steroids that they knew of and put it into the same law that deals with cocaine, heroin, marijuana, Vicodin, methamphetamine, as traditional narcotics and drugs of abuse, and made it a Schedule III controlled substance. And that stigma that links testosterone as an anabolic steroid and cheating, that ethical component of it, that it's unethical to use this, has spilled over past sports, and I think makes the average guy who is 40 or 50 and is maybe his levels are not what they were before, and certainly research supports that, right? That as we age, after the age of 30, guys' testosterone levels maybe 1% a year or so starts boop boop going down, and maybe that's in part why they don't feel like they're 25 anymore. And I don't think that Congress ever intended that those people would have restricted access to something that would make them feel better. They're not competing in sports, right?
Right, yeah.
But that's the effect that law has had.
And I think a lot of men worry about that because people who feel that way, it's like peer pressure. When they say something, maybe I'll consider a testosterone replacement. Their friends, dude, that's cheating. And men don't really talk about these things in groups. So now they're internalizing something.
Right.
They're told that it's bad, so they're going to suffer, not feel like themselves, not feel as good as they can. And that's a problem for mankind because now you have declining levels. So insurance companies, they're seeing this, they're making the range, this arbitrary range, a lot lower.
Right.
They're making it harder for guys to obtain testosterone replacement.
Right.
They're positioning it as something that is almost unreachable unless you literally are so low and don't qualify. It's so awful.
The levels of a 90-year-old woman.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
And obviously we know, going through insurance is really
not good.
We don't need to do that. Yeah.
Preferably not.
Yeah. So then, so guys are like, well, I'm told I'm normal. So they get all the courage in the world to actually go to a doctor, and then they're told you're fine. And they're like, well, I'm not going to resist him. I'm just going to go back to doing what I'm doing. And we were able to educate guys on why going out of pocket and stuff like that is a good thing. Yeah. But these social stigmas that you touched on that apply this pressure, I want to go back and circle back to the masculinity ones. Because take a guy who's internalizing feeling awful, and if he goes on TRT, he is now thought of as somebody who's going to become overly aggressive, a very toxic male, stuff like that. So why is that okay in society for a guy to stay and feel that way? Because it seems like the world is okay with that. Because we've also, and when I say we, government has also made it harder for fertility drugs and things like that. So it's almost like they're positioning everything as this chemical castration in a way. Why is that?
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of double standards, I think. You've got testosterone replacement therapy for people who are hypogonadal, and that's kind of, sort of in a gray area in the way the government kind of sees it. Like you say, there's a number of crackdowns to try to discourage people from doing it. The FDA in 2014 or 2015 did a black box warning on testosterone products. A black box warning. Oh my God, why would I take this? It's warning me it can give me heart attack, stroke,
cancer,
cancer.
All these bad things.
Right. Yeah. And if you really look at and I'm sure your physician friends and were part of the Silverback Summit will talk about this.
Yeah.
But if you look at the underlying evidence, the scientific support for those ideas, it's pretty thin, right? I mean, most of what really the big takeaway is, if you've got low testosterone levels, if you are hypogonadal, you are at higher risk for all sorts of bad stuff, including heart issues, stroke. So absolutely, and that message sometimes doesn't get out there the way it should. The government isn't overly fond of TRT, at least as expressed through FDA. Interestingly, getting back to sort of how testosterone and steroids became criminalized, the DEA, Drug Enforcement Administration, the FDA, the American Medical Association, and the National Institute on Drug Abuse all sent witnesses to Congress back in the late 80s to tell Congress, do not do this. Do not make anabolic steroids a controlled substance, because it's an apple in the orange crate of the Controlled Substances Act. It doesn't belong here. It's
right.
It's not addictive in the same way that heroin. Nobody's going to be lying in an alley with a needle in their shoulder or glute, because they use testosterone. But Congress was so concerned about the impact and ramifications on sport that they said, you know what? Thanks, but we're going to do this anyway. And sure enough, that's what they did. And for these 33 years since that happened, that has stigmatized testosterone and anabolic steroids. And, my practice sometimes means representing people who are accused of either possessing anabolic steroids or very often being underground labs, making it, selling it on social media, which is kind of like the way it works now.
Slide in the DMs and
absolutely. Yeah. And so a lot of people get arrested sometimes for doing this. Over the years, I've represented a lot of people, and most of them have no other criminal conduct in their lives. They got involved because they used testosterone or steroids at some point and said, hey, this isn't so bad. This isn't as bad as what the media says. I like this. And maybe because it's not as available for some people, maybe age related, like you said, doctors are only going to prescribe it in a narrower and narrower context, and who knows how narrow that can get. And so when you have no legitimate source of supply and you've got a high level of demand, basic economic principles, black market. So that's kind of where it is in many ways now. And for those, and if you ask even the typical orthodox endocrinologist about it, they're not going to give you a big thumbs up typically. They're going to say, they're going to go by the same sort of standards that, become lower and lower in order to qualify. And I think most endocrinologists don't really know much about testosterone. They're great on estrogen replacement. They're great on thyroid issues and giving you Synthroid or something like that.
Diabetes.
Diabetes drugs. But when it comes to sort of male hormones, that's why I think a lot of the clinics have sprung up and become more popularized, because you've got doctors who are actually looking at that issue specifically.
Oh yeah, I live in Florida, and there's one every 5 minutes next to the gas station.
Pop right in.
Don't know what they sell. Yes, you
right.
Probably might. Some of them might be your clients, so we have a lot of those. But I wonder often too, and I know there's many delivery methods now because you can't patent the hormone, but if it didn't come in a needle, would it still have that same, like, you're doing something wrong attached to it?
The needle makes it worse, I think.
Yeah.
Whenever you have to use, but yet people inject insulin, and that doesn't have that same
Doesn't
stigma.
faze them.
So that can't be totally it. I think it's probably more the connection to the cheating, the sports, the ethical component of it more than anything else.
Do you think that this will ever get better in that perception?
So I think I probably would have said no until recently. because I've had, many clients through the last 30 years who, some of them very law-abiding people, very respectable people, they get arrested because maybe they ordered some steroids from overseas and it got caught in the mail and gets delivered to them and they get arrested. And even a misdemeanor conviction can really derail somebody's life. Even if they don't get a day in jail, just a criminal conviction has all these collateral consequences that F up your life in multiple ways. So, and they'll say to me, is this, ever going to change? I'm a bodybuilder. I believe that this is helping me to look better and feel better. Maybe some of it is vanity for many of the people. I think it is. Obviously, there's a difference between a medical need for testosterone, true hypogonadal state, and yes, I'm not feeling good. I'm suffering symptoms that are related to that. That's medical, and that's a kind of a different thing than the cosmetic.
Right.
And that is, look, I don't like the way I look, or maybe I've worked out to the point where I can't get any further. I've hit my genetic, threshold, and I can't get past. So I want to do more. Or it's the guy who just wants to get in better shape. Maybe he was in better shape before, and now he's 35 and he's going through a divorce, and he's going to be back on the market, and he wants to look better when he takes his shirt off. And that's sort of the mentality of it. We're a vain culture, obviously.
Of course.
Maybe overly so, and that's fine. But it is interesting that we do celebrate many procedures, including high-risk procedures that are purely for vanity, medical, procedures that are for vanity, that we kind of celebrate. People die on liposuction tables. I've seen horror stories from different types of, breast implants and other prosthetics have had horrific results for people. There was a story a few years ago about a guy who went to Mexico. He wanted to get calf implants because he was, look, it's vanity, right? And who's really looking at your calves? But you wear a pair of shorts and you want them to look good. And he couldn't afford a U.S. doctor. He went to Mexico. It didn't work well. Both got infected, and he was a double amputee. So horrific.
Wow.
So, but yet he would be disallowed if he said, if he said to his doctor, I want to get bigger calves and I want to get bigger muscles. Will you prescribe me, a course, a cycle of anabolic steroids, and I'll train my calves really hard, and that'll give me some. The doctor will throw him out of the office because it's a felony for the doctor to prescribe it. So we do allow, we're a Botox and liposuction society at this point, and that nobody seems to have an issue with that. Could you imagine saying to a woman, no, you can't have breast implants. That's really be happy the way you are, which is really what men are told if they see a doctor about an anabolic steroid
and they
course.
get denied that.
Of course.
I love that you brought that up because I made a post once a few weeks ago talking about people going after guys, especially a lot of my clients who achieve fantastic transformations, but they see it as like this overnight success type of deal, and guys have been lifting for a while.
Just like that,
it happens because they think, they go on TRT and overnight they turn into this muscular physique that they've wanted their entire life.
Like that.
I wish. We all wish. We're all trying, like
putting the time in.
Oh my gosh.
Yes.
So if a guy goes on TRT, then if that's cheating, how is going on something like semaglutide not? Because people run so fast to get that stuff.
Yeah.
Both are prescription. One is actually something that's necessary in a hormone. We don't produce semaglutide.
No,
we don't have
it's not an endogenous
deficiencies. But it's okay to do that because you refuse to actually do hard things and go lift weights and actually diet and take care of yourself. So you can take this injection and lose weight and not do jack shit. That's okay.
Right.
But taking testosterone is not.
Yeah, it's a huge double standard. There are these, how we see things and compartmentalize things to see in one context it's perfectly fine, and in another it's not. I did a column a number of years ago about, I don't know how into Marvel Comics you are, but Steve Rogers, Captain America, right? That came out in 1940. is when Captain America started. And it was right after, it was in the throes of, World War II, and you've got, the Nazi threat in Germany. Yep. And so Steve Rogers is this skinny kid from Brooklyn who gets turned down. They won't take him in the army because he's too frail. He's too skinny. He's a mess. He's this little wimpy guy. And so they say, well, here's what we'll do, though. We'll put you in this special program. And the special program is injecting him with a serum that creates huge, powerful muscles. And suddenly he's totally jacked. And, it's not coincidence that this serum and this whole story was within 3 or 4 years of the discovery of testosterone that's when it was first synthesized by scientists, was in 1935. And so, is there a connection here? I think not. And so, so we've got this serum, and the serum is actually even more powerful than steroids, I guess, because he doesn't even have to train. You just inject him with it, and suddenly his muscles are growing. And it's so funny that, nobody's really looked at it in that context, that, wait a minute, Captain America is the first juice head. And yet he's a hero. We're celebrating this guy's unnatural, synthetic, chemically induced muscles because he's fighting Hitler. And he actually punches Hitler in the face. And I think the first comic, he punches Hitler in the face. So because in that context it's okay, he's a hero, but yet anybody who, like you say, just says, you know what? I want to do a cycle of gear so that I look better. For me, you want to do your Botox, you want to do, your liposuction, that's all fine. This is what I want to do. Well, unfortunately, there's only one criminal, and it's that guy who by our laws is made a criminal.
So are the superheroes now toxic?
Yeah. Well, there was a superhero called Toxic Avenger. I don't know if you've ever heard of that one.
No.
Well, it was the Toxic Avenger was the first superhero from New Jersey who fell in a vat of toxic waste and came out with these various superpowers. I was the lead villain in a series of those movies.
Oh, that's right.
Yes.
I've seen you post on that.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, yes, I was the villain in the Toxic.
Do you have the costume?
I have pieces of it somewhere. I played 2 roles. I played like an evil corporate chairman who did terrible, terrible things. And then I reveal myself in Toxic Avenger 3 to be actually the devil incarnate. And I rip open my own stomach and I climb out, and I'm wearing this form-fitted latex suit that was made out of a full body cast, including of my head, where like the 2 straws to breathe until it solidifies. But it was a fun movie, and I've done a number of. The skill set that's shared between trial lawyer and actor are similar.
Yeah.
You're performing, you got to be able to stand up in front of people, feel comfortable, persuade, make it real for them. I had a tiny little walk-on in the first season of The Sopranos as a cop in the first season. So just to be even a speck on the map of that incredible series was, very special to me. But yeah, I think some of the best trial lawyers have either a theatrical background and I've done a lot of theater too. I was a theater minor, but are able to kind of synthesize the skill set that you get out of stage performance and film performance and inject it into what you do in a courtroom.
And I would think you have to have some level of confidence and optimal testosterone to perform in the way that you want.
Well, it's funny you say that. So James Dabbs was probably the father of testosterone research, and he looked into everything, often from a occupational standpoint. So he was trying to figure out testosterone levels in different occupations, and one of the highest testosterone levels occupationally for folks is actors. Actors, male actors have and female tend to have higher testosterone levels, and it may be part because if you're a more confident person to begin with, you may gravitate to that. And confidence is certainly linked to testosterone levels. If you're not very confident, you have lower testosterone levels, you're probably not going to be going into a field where you are just rejected over and over and over. The best case is that somebody won't reject you, and you go from one state of unemployment to the next, because every time you finish a gig, okay, now I have to find a job. And so so it may also be that those challenges, because testosterone does increase with a challenge. The challenge hypothesis is the idea that testosterone levels rise to meet a challenge, whatever that challenge is. And the challenge could be finding a new job for a lot of people in that field. Trial lawyers also have. So I kind of have the high testosterone affiliation on both of my occupational aspects. Trial lawyers, he found, have higher levels of testosterone and these are all averages, but have higher average testosterone levels than real estate lawyers or contract lawyers. Those who are sitting at a desk, working away, but not needing to get up there, not needing to face an adversary, which I think is healthy and good for everybody. You know, we're living in a time when we're kind of thinking that we need to avoid stress, we need to avoid any kind of problem, that we need to be in a safe space, and if we're confronted with something that is outside the postage stamp of our experience, then we need to retreat to a protected cocoon where we're safe. And that book that I co-wrote a while back, Alpha Male Challenge, was kind of a response to that, and the idea that the only way you really grow and build your own resilience and your ability to overcome challenges is to face challenges. If you never face a challenge, I always say nothing grows in a safe space. No. Nothing will ever grow there if you stay there. So true. So the more you can, years ago I was feeling that I was getting a little uncomfortable with heights. And I remember being up on my roof doing some work or something, and I was like, for the first time, I'm like, wow, I got a queasy feeling up here. This isn't cool. So what do you do? So one option is never go on a roof again. Avoid all exposure to any sort of heights. So I did, being me, I did the opposite. So I took skydiving lessons.
Of course.
And so the first time, and it was terrifying, clearly. The first time you jump, you throw yourself out of a moving airplane, it takes a few seconds for your brain to process, what did I just do? You're looking down 3 miles of empty air, and you're just going to throw yourself into that abyss. But once you do it, and I would recommend everybody do it. I highly recommend it, because the more fearful you are of doing it, the more you get out of it, because you realize, wow, I thought I could never do that. I was terrified to do that. I never imagined I could do that, and I did it. What else can I do? What other things am I believing that I'm held back from doing that I can do? And so it really unlocks potential in a great way. Skydive or anything, whenever you can get out of your comfort zone, break free from that comfort zone, and do what scares you. That's I think one of the best ways of growing.
I love that. Like, I try to get that across to my clients in fitness, because there's certain approaches to training where you leave reps in the tank and stuff like that. And I'm like, how about if people don't know what failure actually is, why don't we just go there? And they tend to stop when it starts to hurt or get uncomfortable.
Right.
And you know how, like, the older days of training in dirty gyms with people around you yelling obscenities that nobody could say in public at all.
My world for many years.
Yeah. I love that world. If you do any of, there's no chalk allowed in gyms, So getting guys, mostly I work with guys, getting guys to understand how to train hard.
Right.
and to be uncomfortable.
Right.
And it's okay if it hurts. I never anticipated it as like a thing to address, you know?
Yeah, but the society is kind of moving in that direction where you should never be uncomfortable. You know, report as soon as you're uncomfortable, you need to report it. You know, be uncomfortable. Uncomfortable is a great place to be. You should never be too comfortable because you're never going to get anywhere when you're comfortable. There's got to be, there's got to be a catalyst for action. You know, nobody goes to the gym because they're comfortable. If you're comfortable, you're not going to the gym. You're just going to stay home and lie on the couch. It's if you got to be uncomfortable with something physically or even uncomfortable about yourself. You know, I don't like the way I look. I don't like having, a 50-inch waist. And so, I'm gonna change that. I'm gonna use my discomfort to be the catalyst for me to improve in one way or another. If you're not uncomfortable, you're not changing and you're not improving.
I think that's probably why cold plunges are popular now. Like people are trying to go that route and create environments where there is discomfort.
It's a counter movement to it.
Yeah. And
which is great.
Just like, okay, that's great. Also, can we duplicate this in the gym?
Right.
Testosterone is a winning hormone. That will help your drive in the gym. It will help your success in life. I mean, do you feel your clients are more successful in business and in their life if they have more optimal levels?
100%. I think, and just resistance training. Just anything that makes you more muscular is going to make you more confident, make you have a greater feeling of competence. I always say I'm a better lawyer for having been a competitive bodybuilder.
Absolutely.
No question about it, because you learn that lessons of discipline, sacrifice. You've got to give huge sacrifices when everybody else is eating whatever they want, and you're denying it with your little prepped meal, and perseverance and overcoming obstacles. Okay, my tricep hurts, or maybe there's a little minor tear in a muscle, or whatever it is that your limitations are. You have to find ways. I'm going to work around that, and I'm going to continue this journey notwithstanding that. And when you learn those lessons, you can apply those lessons to anything in your life. So I think get in the gym, train as hard as you can, learn the lessons of discipline and perseverance and patience. Nobody developed a 20-inch arm since Tuesday, right? I mean, it takes, bodybuilding is such a beautiful thing because you have to understand that you're not going to see the fruits of the labor for a long time. You've got to have patience. So the people who go into the gym, and like you say, they train to failure, they have delayed onset muscle soreness, and oh my God, my arms are killing me, and they don't go back because they don't really see any progress yet. You've got to have them toe the line and be patient, because over the span of weeks, and the weeks become months, and the months become years, there's this transformation that occurs that's just amazing.
It's beautiful to watch, and the confidence level goes up with people and everything. And when you walk into a room with a physique such as yours, immediately command respect.
Yeah, so I people ask me about that. So I'm usually the bigger, more muscular gorilla in the courtroom.
Not today.
Although
Courtroom,
there you go. but I never use it in a way that is in your face, or I don't. I find that the physicality is there, and it's implicit. The potential for mayhem that exists by virtue of the physique that you bring to the table, I think says it all. And I go overboard to be the nicest guy in the courtroom, the most respectful person to everybody. That's me as a person anyway.
Yeah.
But I find that defies the expectations, I suppose, based on the physicality.
Yeah.
And the combination becomes this wonderfully pleasant persona with this terrifying underlying threat that I think is very effective. And it also gives you feel confident when you're in shape, when you feel good, when you're You know, you fill out the suit. You know, my tailors are not as happy with me.
I can imagine.
But I've got a very good custom tailor.
I love when guys complain. I gotta get my suit taken out again, or I gotta get new clothes.
Yeah.
Like, oh, sorry, not sorry. You asked for it.
Yeah.
And honestly, like you said, that knowing the discipline. Like if someone said they have competed or they competed in the past, all right, cool, they get it.
Yes.
Like there's just a mutual respect and understanding for what that person is capable
You're
of.
part of the tribe.
Because they've shown.
Yeah.
The proficiency. And so that leads me to looking a certain way. Now that seems to be where if you have visible muscle of any kind, it feeds a narrative. And that narrative of a man with muscles is not a positive one in our society lately.
Right.
And the younger coaches that I talk to are kind of lost as to their role in society. How do they communicate with a woman? If they compliment me, is that okay? They don't have the confidence maybe to compliment me. So they're kind of like in this no man's land now where I'm being told not to act how I naturally should.
Right.
But I'm also told to man up. And it's creating a lot of confusion and a lot of anxiety for men.
I think the more traditional man up has been dialed down to a degree, and this, what do I do? Who am I? How do I act with women? How do I act with other men? Has sort of replaced it. And so, men are in kind of a weird place. It's hard to know as this very rapid state of change has been occurring in society. And part of it is, women have become more empowered than in the traditional patriarchal, society that we once were. And that's a good thing, women coming to their own. Actually, more law students now are female than male. So we're going to soon have many more female lawyers in the workplace than male lawyers. And all of that is great, but we can't lose, what men should be and how men should act. And so it is a confusing time. When I went to law school, I was I'd been competing in bodybuilding before that. And I was really there was one female law student who was also in shape. We wound up writing a fitness column together
funny.
For the law school. But nobody really looked like me.
Yeah.
And there were certain immediate preconceived notions about who I was, that I wasn't smart, that I'd probably fail out of law school, that I was a big meathead. And so, me being me, rather than kind of trying to convince them otherwise, I doubled down. So I wore the hat on backwards. I wore the Zuba pants.
That's
amazing. I wore the boat neck T. Michael everywhere.
Fanny
back
pack.
in the day. I
You
don't
had
know
a
if I
fanny
ever
pack.
went to the fanny pack.
Oh, man.
I don't know if I did the fanny pack. Even I was able to resist that. But so rather than kind of try to refute their narrative, and I figured, look, I was one of the few there, if not the only one there, who was on a full academic scholarship. So I didn't pay anything for law school because
you were actually smart as a meathead.
So,
Amazing.
and I made law review on the first year, which is, also accolades. So they were like, wow, what is this?
Unicorn.
I was doubling down on meathead.
I love that.
But yeah, there are stereotypical ideas. Well, it's okay to make fun of muscular men, right? Remember there was a chain of fitness centers that would do commercials on television where the whole commercial was just lampooning muscular men, throwing them out of the gym and that they were stupid and they picked things up and put them down and all of that.
Oh yeah.
It's trying to sound mocking Arnold. One of the cool things, I'll tell you this. One of the cool things that came with sort of me being a kid who was into bodybuilding into a lawyer who deals with a lot of testosterone and bodybuilding and fitness issues was I've gotten to spend some time with Arnold Schwarzenegger. And the first time that I met him, I mean, I was a kid when he was competing, so I was looking up to him from when I was young. And so at the Arnold Classic in 2002, so we're talking 21 years ago, it was arranged for me to meet him back, in a private meeting. And my palms were sweating. I was so nervous. And so suddenly the day comes and the moment is there, and he comes walking out, and there he is, larger than life. I'm looking at him, and he walks up to me, and I'm standing there, and he puts out his hand, and somebody's introducing, says, Arnold Schwarzenegger, meet Rick Collins. And I do an impression of him.
Oh my God, you did?
That, I don't know, Allie, it just bubbled out.
That's all that came out
and I put out my hand, and I just went, it's super fantastic to meet you. And his eyes got wide, and as soon as I said it, I'm like, I can't believe I just did this. What is going to happen? What happens in this moment? And he laughed. He's like, you do an impression of me. I'm like, yeah. He goes, this is good. And we laughed. And I once got to spend a whole afternoon with him in his office in Santa Monica regarding professional bodybuilding issues. And so, my firm did work for Sylvester Stallone's company for a while when he had a nutrition company. So for me, it's just been a unbelievable, great journey.
So cool. I love that. Oh my gosh, Arnold doing an impression. So with like this, social outlook of guys being muscular, and this is a toxic masculinity concept. So now we're taking the healthy physique, and all of a sudden that is bad. So there is, the whole shift in the gender fluidity and the dysphoria and stuff like that regarding testosterone, because it seems that the treatment in TRT is more easily accessible for women who would want to transition. Now, why is that okay? And if a guy wants to become more of himself as a man, that is viewed as not okay.
So a couple of years ago, I co-authored a piece that was published in a journal of addiction on these issues of drug policy, and that is, comparing, contrasting, and examining this issue. So there's two separate disorders under the DSM-5 considered mental health disorders. One is called gender dysphoria. And that basically means, hey, I'm born in the wrong body. I've been born as in a female body, but I identify as male. And the other is somewhat also a body image issue, and it's muscle dysmorphia. And what that means is I look in the mirror, I'm 240 pounds of shredded beef, and I see this Steve Rogers before he got the seal. I see this little skinny kid from Brooklyn who can't get in the Army.
Yeah.
So both are disconnects between self-image and phenotype. The what we show outwardly. So I examined with two colleagues this issue of how, and I'm not saying they're exactly the same, right, certainly, but they are both mental disorders according to DSM-5.
Right. Not your opinion?
Not necessarily an opinion of anybody
right
at this point, but the opinion of the experts in psychology anyway. And I think that there are many who don't consider it that way. And I think it was Norway or Denmark that is the first country that has removed it from their classification of disorders. And then that may happen. But it's necessary to be a disorder for one purpose, and that is that testosterone is a controlled substance. And the only way that you can prescribe it is for a medical purpose, not for a cosmetic purpose. And so if gender dysphoria were deemed to no longer be something that required medical intervention, if it was just this cosmetic choice, you wouldn't be able to prescribe the testosterone. So it is customary for doctors now to prescribe testosterone to somebody who either is assigned female at birth and is looking to become a male, or even assigned female at birth and is looking to be more masculine along a non-binary gender variant spectrum, not even to become a male. And that's perfectly okay within the context of medical ethics and the law because it's for a medical purpose. Somebody with muscle dysmorphia, on the other hand, who also is looking and saying, look, I would feel more comfortable at 240 than I am at 150.
Yeah.
And, I would like to feel better sooner. And so I would like to use a course of anabolic steroids or testosterone in addition to my training and my nutrition and all the other things that I'm willing to do. That person not only doesn't get the testosterone prescription, but is driven to the black market if he wants it. And if the doctor did prescribe it, well, that would be a felony, and the doctor would be facing jail, and the possession of the testosterone would not be pursuant to a lawful prescription, so he would also be in violation of the criminal law.
So, and let me understand the clarification here.
And I'm not saying that they should be treated equally,
right,
that either is a disorder necessarily. I think we tend to over pathologize all sorts of behaviors, but and even if they're not, certainly not the same, is the disparity where one is certainly very freely and understood and maybe even celebrated, and the other you go to prison for, is that difference in treatment too wide a difference? Is that too big a gap of policy? I don't know. And we've questioned that. We're probably the only ones who raised that issue. I don't think anybody ever really thought about, other than you here, how is it if you're not happy with your body, and some people can follow and use medical technology to feel better about themselves, why shouldn't other people?
And it brings it back to people who are overweight are not happy and they're getting semaglutide. That's okay.
Right.
But now this isn't. And if a woman wants to transition, or as you said, become more masculine, those do end up and result in cosmetic changes.
Sure.
So that cosmetic change is okay, but then again, more muscularity. And we both know that it doesn't mean you inject and explode into muscles. You do have to go to the gym.
Unlike Steve Rogers.
Unless you're Steve Rogers.
Yeah.
So
yes,
that's where it's tough to understand.
Yeah.
No,
that's for sure. And it's interesting because when you said, looping back, when you asked before, will things ever change in terms of the classification of testosterone? The glimmer of hope that there might be some reduced restrictions on testosterone is coming from the trans community, because the trans community has raised the issue of complaint that the classification of testosterone as a controlled substance restricts access, creates all sorts of red tape, does all these things that make it difficult or inconvenient, or in some cases impossible, for people assigned female at birth to get it in order to transition. And 2 U.S. senators have now written a letter to the Biden administration urging that testosterone be declassified because of its effect on the trans community. Not on the muscle dysmorphia, not on the hypogonadal men, not on the 4 million American men or more who are on testosterone replacement. It's all fine for them. Now, but on the trans community, it's unduly restrictive, and access is denied.
It's fascinating. It's also a world that I've not really navigated, and I'm not comfortable because I feel no matter what you say, it's the wrong thing.
Yes. And
I don't like me being made to feel that way, because I don't know what the right thing is.
We can both be canceled for this conversation in and of itself.
Exactly.
Even though I think I speak for both of us when I say everybody should feel happy about.
Of course.
Nobody should be discriminated against based on what they do, who they love, any other aspect of it. But just talking about some of these sensitive issues on one side or another is going to become a lightning rod for criticism, and that's unfortunate. I think the only way that we're ever going to move forward as a society and maybe unify and find some areas of compromise and unity as a nation is if we talk about these things and without being afraid of being called a name or being called out as a bad person.
Yes, because understanding how to navigate in a way that I guess as a society we can move forward without that fear. And we're frankly just trying to basically advocate for men to feel how they should
Right.
as a man. But also, like you alluded to before, having low testosterone, you can put yourself in a position of massive issues as you get older.
Right. No,
All the
without
things.
question. Yes.
Yeah. The things guys get told are going to happen because of testosterone, like heart attacks, cancer, all that stuff, happen because of low testosterone.
Sure. Yeah. And we kind of touched on it a little bit, but not only does a man's individual testosterone go down year by year after age 30, but as a society, generationally, our average testosterone levels are going down. There was a study where plummeting. What they found was, basically our grandfathers had higher testosterone levels than our fathers, and our fathers have on average higher than us, and we're seeing this dramatic decrease. And the reasons, certainly obesity is a factor, lack of exercise, all of those things. Nobody as much as cuts their lawn anymore, let alone go out and, hunt for food,
you can do it from your phone.
Right.
You can wear diapers and press buttons.
You don't have to leave your couch. So that's certainly part of it. Endocrine disruptors and other, environmental toxins are certainly another part of it. There's also, as a society, we're not really valuing a higher testosterone individual anymore. We're valuing a more, everybody kind of the same, brought to sort of this lower level. Even the concept of alpha male
that's
is
canceled,
looked at.
right?
It's canceled, right? And it's funny because we wrote the book Alpha Male Challenge, and the idea of it was alpha male. The concept was that it's somebody who's at their top of their game, being their very best without being an asshole.
Yeah.
That's the idea. And it's funny because a lot of women took the program of our book and reached out to me and said, when are you going to come out with an alpha female challenge? But, in the meantime, this book is great. I'm following the program and I'm feeling great, and I'm gaining muscle, and even for women, obviously, building muscle and bones, strong bones over the aging process is important, but it's equally for men as well. And the amount of muscle mass that we hold as men as we get older is huge for our overall health and well-being. So
very much so.
Whether it's testosterone or just heavy resistance training as we age, or a combination of both, it's really more of the fountain of youth than anything else.
There's been a lot of, like, the media says, women are into dad bods or whatever that is, and then there's the anti-dad bod movement, and no one really knows the answer. And so some women, I think, have said, like, well, I don't want a guy who's super shredded because they feel threatened.
Right, sure.
And then they prefer honestly, I don't care who you prefer, what you prefer, like, there's no judgment. But when the shaming doesn't go both ways, then
right.
I feel it's kind of not fair.
Yeah.
And I actually did a poll on my Instagram for women asking, do you still appreciate chivalry? And it was like 80%. And it was questions directed at the toxic masculinity movement. Now, my audience is 70% men.
Right.
So I had to make sure I was direct, women only, because the guys would totally click. But as somebody who works with primarily men, yet is a woman, I feel that there's things that I can get away with more than if it were a guy.
100%.
So
Yes.
I don't mind going at this topic the way that I do, because I think I can represent both sides. But I will say, talking to women, they do prefer a man to take charge, take the lead, help make decisions, take decisive action when it
Yes.
comes to dating, when it comes to relationships and stuff like that. And that's not what is reflected in the media.
No, quite the opposite, and even corporate entities have kind of accepted this. There's a mall near me, and whenever I walk past this one store, it's got like a T-shirt. It's a men's store. It's got a T-shirt with a mannequin with a huge belly, like overhanging its shorts, and it's like celebrating this sort of dad bod is sort of the new standard. One of the primary reasons I had written Alpha Male Challenge was I'd read an article. I don't remember what magazine it was in, but the title was "Why I Left My Beta Husband." And I remember reading it. It was just an eye-opening. I had already been looking at the decline in testosterone levels generationally, as well as all of these other societal, cultural changes that were sort of devaluing men, devaluing traditional masculinity. But that was like, wow, okay, so this is a woman's perspective. And she said, look, I married him and he gave me everything that I wanted. He was the word supportive was, I guess, the most positive attribute. He was he stayed home with the baby. She was able to go out and, work and advance her career, and she was very career minded. And at some point, she began to see him no longer in a sexual way, but sort of as this supportive beta male that no longer really was attractive to her. And she was somewhat apologetic about this idea that, she was going to leave him when he did everything that she asked, but it wasn't really what she wanted.
Yeah.
And she wound up finding a different guy, got divorced, and the new guy was more of an equal partner, more of somebody who was more assertive. And obviously she was probably a high testosterone woman. And when we talk about testosterone, obviously women have higher testosterone. Women are probably more assertive than lower testosterone women, just like with men. But she had found somebody who challenged her and who probably had those attributes of chivalry and protectiveness and those sort of traditional, that some would describe as patriarchal and would attack, and maybe the media is making more of that. But when you really ask women, I think you're right. I think the feedback is we don't want these, soft, there was a term metrosexual that came out, a while back, and that fell off, and that was just the beginning of the sort of descent from traditional masculinity into a more non-binary standard where, a manly man is to be mocked and attacked and, and sort of, more of the soy boy is the better standard.
Yeah, I like that we're talking about this because
I didn't know we were going to go here, but here we are.
Here we are.
I do want to talk a little bit about the DEA rule because I think that that's gotten some publicity lately, and we can talk about what they're proposing. But this is, I think, hopefully this is of interest to some of the folks who are attending the Silverback Summit.
I think it is because I hear from my girlfriends who, I need a guy who I just don't want to decide where we're eating. Why can't he decide where we're eating? That type of thing. Take charge and lead.
Yeah.
Yet they're more alpha driven, I would say, similar to myself. And that's a whole separate issue is the masculine feminine energy.
Right.
But I hear from both sides. of like the dating stuff. So I don't position myself as a dating expert by any means, but these are conversations I have with clients.
Right.
And socially, it is a topic that does not get talked about enough, or it gets talked about like, you know, with whispers and stuff like that, because people are afraid.
People are afraid. People, you know, don't want to say the wrong thing and suddenly have it misinterpreted and they're canceled.
Yes, exactly.
So please don't cancel us.
Yeah, please don't. There'll be no actual in-person summit if you cancel me. So
that's right. So
that's fun. But so with the DEA thing, I think because that's so fresh right now, if you can kind of just give a very brief overview of what the issue is for those who may not really know, because they're either not on TRT or just haven't paid attention, and where we're at with that.
Okay. So the DEA, Drug Enforcement Administration, has just issued a rule last month. It's a proposed rule. It's not in effect yet. They kind of floated it out there for commentary from people. And what it says is that there are going to be some restrictions on controlled substance prescribing that have not existed for the last 3 years. And it's essentially an amendment or an enforcement angle on a law that was enacted in 2008. And that was a law that went into effect that basically said that if you go online and you want to get a prescription for a controlled substance, that you got to first see the doctor. You can't just do this over the internet. And the reason that they did it was because there was this 17-year-old kid who went online, found a rogue pharmacy or doctor that sent him a bunch of Vicodin. He took the Vicodin, he overdosed, he died. And so Congress said, we can't have that happen. We've got to come up with a way of protecting people from, you know, these websites that just basically are pill pushers. So they enacted this law. It went into effect in 2008. It was focused on Vicodin. It was focused on painkillers, on opiates, but because testosterone is an anabolic steroid and a Schedule III controlled substance, it gets lumped right in. So what we have now as of 2008 was you couldn't have if you wanted to do a prescription for testosterone via telemedicine, you first had to see the doctor.
Right.
There was an exception that was in that law that said if there's a national health emergency, then we'll put it on ice. You know, we'll wait on that. 2020, you know, in 2020, there was a national health emergency that started. And so the DEA, which enforces this law, basically said, we're not gonna go after, you know, people are told to stay home. They're not leaving their houses, hard to see doctors. So for the length of this national health emergency, we're not gonna enforce it. The Biden administration has announced that the national health emergency will end on May 11th. And so as of May 11th, the question is, well, what happens? Do we go back to having to see your doctor prior to getting the prescription? So DEA has kind of come up with this proposed idea that you wouldn't have to see your doctor before, but you would have to see the doctor within 30 days of the prescription. Okay. And this is only if you've never seen the doctor. If you've ever seen the doctor, none of this applies to you. But if you've never seen the doctor and you get a new prescription, it's got to be 30 days. Well, what happened if you got the prescription during this national health emergency? Do you now have to see the doctor within 30 days? No. You've got 6 months grace period in which to see that doctor. So does that mean that for some people, they're going to have to get a cheap airline flight and go to Florida or somewhere, wherever their clinic is? Yes. There's also an option that allows the patient to use a local doctor. So if you're in Ohio and you meet with a DEA licensed Ohio doctor, and you do sort of a Zoom call with the Florida practitioner, that can be sort of a substitute for seeing the Florida doctor. So I don't know, there might be some doctors, the guy in Ohio is going to have to go along with all of this. It's a big pain. There's no question. And is it really necessary for a TRT prescription? I could see maybe for Vicodin, maybe we do want some safeguards for, you know, do you really need this prescription, or are you just an addict? Maybe have some doctor be able to eyeball you. for TRT, it probably doesn't really apply much, but I have heard some social media influencers claiming that what this proposed rule says is that you'll need to see your doctor every 30 days for the rest of your life. And that's nonsense, you know. And it's also nonsense that this is the government's way of cracking down on TRT.
Yeah.
This really isn't about TRT. It's really about Vicodin and, you know, opiates. But unfortunately, because of the controlled status of T, it gets lumped into this. So I think there are people who are writing to the DEA trying to uncouple TRT from this or to get some more leniency. It's not in effect yet, but you know, I guess my just message is it's not what you may have heard on, you know, social media. And anybody who I'll be following this. Anybody who wants to keep track of it can certainly follow me on Instagram or other social. I tweet as well. So anywhere on social media, Rick Collins ESQ, I'm easy to find.
Yeah, you've been posting a lot of the interviews that have come up and gone through that, and I'm sure the practitioners themselves are scared as to what's going to happen too if they have to change their practice.
They may need to change their model, because if they started during this health emergency time where they didn't have to worry about ever actually seeing anybody ever, well, that is going to change. Somebody's going to have to see the patient, whether it's, you know, the practitioner at the clinic or some affiliation with another physician.
Awesome. So we just basically wait and see what happens.
Yeah,
May 11th is the day.
So, you know, just follow me and I'll keep the word going and give the information as it comes forward.
And if somebody wants to consult with you, is that the same place that they would go?
So I'm so easy to find, Allie. So too easy maybe.
Well, you never know.
So you can go on the web. It's rickcollins.com, steroidlaw.com. I started way back before I wrote my first book, Legal Muscle. Instagram is probably where I'm most active lately with Rick Collins ESQ. I also tweet at the same handle. Some people follow me on LinkedIn, but I'm pretty easy to find. And my email address is you can email me through the websites. And
Cool.
I do consult with people regularly, whether it's clinics or I get a lot of calls from people. Hey, I just ordered a package and it looks like the feds have seized it. What do I do now? So I get like those. And anybody, if you're in sort of the underground anabolic steroid world, either as a user or as a underground lab or whatever, and something goes awry,
Call you.
Yeah, I think you already know to do that probably, because I get enough of those calls. And I think you could look at some of my lawyer reviews. I work my butt off for my clients. I love what I do. I think that I have this unicornish, unique skill set that enables me to do things that maybe other lawyers wouldn't be able to do for people. I'm blessed to be able to do it, and I thank you for giving me the time for this interview.
This was awesome. So all the details that Rick just mentioned will be on the Silverback webpage, and he will also be a speaker at the in-person Silverback Summit this November in Austin, Texas. So stay tuned for that.
There we go.
Mine's bigger.
I don't know about that.